My name is Adrian Cole, and I am a researcher of forgotten myths. I never believed the world still hid real magic until Europe spoke to me. I had spent most of my life in archives, breathing dust and ink, chasing legends that everyone else called metaphors. Professors smiled politely when I spoke about spirits of land. Friends stopped inviting me to parties. But I believed stories were only asleep, not dead. On the Isle of Skye in Scotland, I met an old guide named Fergus. His beard looked like it had grown from mist itself. He led me through wet grass and black stone to a circle of stones locals called the Whispering Crown. Ravens watched us like judges. At sunset, Fergus said, the stones remember. The wind passed through the stones and began to speak, not in words, but in memories. It felt like standing inside a dream that did not belong to me. I touched one stone and suddenly stood in a battlefield from 1,000 years ago. Knights screamed, steel rang, blood stained the grass. I felt pain that wasn't mine. When I pulled my hand away, I collapsed. Fergus only nodded. Europe remembers everything, he said. Its ghosts are not dead, they are stored. That night, a woman appeared in my dreams. She called herself Ilara, a spirit bound to the land. She showed me plagues, revolutions, love stories, betrayals, all flowing like a river through stone and soil. She walked with me through burning cities and silent villages. She showed me letters never sent, songs never finished, prayers never answered. When I woke, the stones were silent. Fergus was gone. Only his staff remained, carved with symbols I could not read. Europe had shown me its truth. It is a continent of memory where the past is never finished. It only waits to be touched. I wrote in my journal with shaking hands, "This journey is not about places. It is about the souls of the world." In Morocco, I traveled with a woman named Samira, a desert tracker whose eyes saw more than distance. She brought me deep into the Sahara to a place no map named. For 3 days, we walked through heat that felt like fire. At night, the stars seemed close enough to fall into our hands. At midnight, the sand began to pulse like breathing. The ground opened into a glowing cavern where light flowed like water. Samira knelt. "This is the heart," she said, "Africa's spirit." Inside, shadows moved like animals made of fire. A voice spoke from everywhere, "I am hunger and abundance. I am birth and bone." I saw ancient kingdoms rise from dust, saw children born beneath acacia trees, saw chains and ships and suffering. But I also saw resistance, drums beating, warriors standing, mothers singing hope into darkness. I saw traders crossing salt roads, storytellers keeping history alive, rebels who died with songs on their lips. A figure formed from flame and wind, a man with eyes like stars. He named himself Keba. He touched my chest, and I felt every rhythm of Africa, joy, grief, endurance. "You may leave," he said, "but you will never be empty again." When I emerged, the desert was silent. Samira smiled. "Now you hear it too," she said. And I did. Beneath every step, I felt a heartbeat. In Nepal, I climbed with a monk named Tenzin to a hidden temple above the clouds. In its center stood a black mirror. "It shows not who you are," Tenzin said, "but who you have been." I looked and became many. A warrior in ancient China, a poet in Persia, a mother in India, a child lost on the Silk Road, a sailor who never returned, a healer burned as a witch. Each life ended, and each death felt real. I screamed when I returned to myself. Tenzin caught me. "Asia is not one story," he said. "It is a library of souls." That night, Spirits walked through the temple like soft smoke. They whispered their names, begging to be remembered. One stayed behind, a young woman called Leon. She died centuries ago, but could not move on. "Write me," she begged, "then I will live." I wrote her story in my journal. When I finished, she smiled and faded like dawn mist. Asia taught me that identity is not a single face. It is 1,000 reflections. In Canada, I joined a Cree elder named Joseph near a forest older than history. He said the land itself dreams. That night, the trees began to move, not physically, but in spirit. Their shadows walked like people. Animals spoke in voices made of wind. Joseph burned sage. "Listen," he said. The ground showed me visions, buffalo herds, native nations, broken treaties, iron rails cutting the land, cities rising like scars. I saw children taken from families, songs forbidden, names erased, and still spirits standing unbroken. Then the land spoke. They forgot I am alive. A spirit in the shape of a giant wolf appeared. His name was Mako. He looked at me with ancient sadness. "Tell them," he said, "we are not scenery." When I woke, Joseph was gone. But in the dirt beside me lay a wolf claw carved from stone. North America is not wild. It is watching. In the Amazon, the air itself felt alive. It pressed against my skin like warm breath. I traveled by river with a healer named Yara, a woman whose face seemed carved from patience. She spoke little, but when she did, even the insects went quiet. She brought me to ruins swallowed by vines, stone faces half-eaten by moss, stairs leading nowhere. At night, she brewed a dark, bitter drink. "You asked to see," she said. "Now you must not look away." When I drank, the world broke open. The jungle breathed. I saw rivers as veins, roots as nerves, trees as bones of a gigantic body. I was standing inside a living God. From the leaves rose a woman made of green fire. Her eyes were storms. Her name was Amaru. She showed me men in metal armor cutting through cities of gold. I felt blades, chains, disease. I became a child hiding while soldiers burned his village. I became a priest whose gods were smashed. I became a woman watching her forest die tree by tree. Her voice shook the sky. They took my blood and called it wealth. I felt her rage, but also her grief. She did not hate humans. She mourned them. "Why do you watch and write?" she asked me. "Why do you not stand?" I tried to speak, but had no words. When I woke, I was crying. My hands were covered in dirt and leaves, as if the jungle had held me. Yara touched my forehead. "If she showed herself to you," she said, "then you are bound to her. Every lie you write will wound her again." South America is not just a continent. It is a heart that still beats, even as it bleeds. Maru did not guide me with maps. He guided me with songs. We walked through endless red land where the sky felt closer than the ground. He sang as he walked, low, steady notes that felt older than language. "These are song lines," he said. "They are roads for the spirit. Without them, the world would fall apart." At night, the stars began to pulse in rhythm with his voice. The land glowed with invisible lines of light. When I stepped onto one, I heard creation itself. Fire cracking into existence, water learning to move, humans learning to speak. From the sand rose a serpent of light, vast as the horizon. Its name was Wura. "You walk on stories you do not sing," it said. "That is why your world forgets itself." It taught me one note, only one. When I sang it, the air folded. Time peeled back like skin. I saw the first fire touched by human hands. I heard the first laugh. I felt the first grief. Maru watched me with calm eyes. "Now you know," he said. "Knowing is heavy." Australia is not ancient in the way ruins are ancient. It is ancient like breathing, never stopping, never ending. I went to Antarctica alone. No guides, no songs, no jungle voices, only wind and white. The silence there is not empty. It is full of things that no longer need sound. The ice whispered without words. When I touched it, I saw time without people. Oceans before names, creatures before memory, stars falling into water. I saw humanity as a brief flame, bright and fragile. Deep in the ice, I saw myself, old, forgotten, bones beneath snow. No books, no names, no one remembering me. A voice came from everywhere and nowhere. All stories end here. I understood then, Antarctica is not cruel. It is honest. It does not love. It does not hate. It simply remembers when nothing else does. When I left, I carried no object, no symbol, only understanding. I am still Adrian Cole. But I am no longer just a man. I am a witness. The 7 parts of the world are not divided by borders. They are divided by spirits, and every spirit is alive, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. After I left Europe, its memories followed me like quiet footsteps. In every city I passed afterward, I sometimes smelled smoke from wars long ended, or heard laughter from people who no longer had names. I would wake at night hearing bells that were not there, and once I wrote an entire letter in a language I do not know. I burned it at dawn, afraid I had borrowed someone else's life too deeply. Africa did not leave me either. Some mornings my heart beat in strange rhythms, faster, slower, like drums searching for a dancer. I began to notice pain in places I had never been, drought in my throat, chains in my wrists. When I helped strangers, it felt less like kindness and more like repayment of an invisible debt. Asia filled my dreams with faces. Sometimes I woke not knowing my own name. I would look in mirrors and wait for the reflection to decide who I was that day. I learned to speak softly because I felt surrounded by lives that were not finished speaking. I started writing not for readers, but for ghosts who might need a door back into memory. North America made me careful where I walked. I stopped throwing stones into rivers. I stopped cutting branches for no reason. I thanked the ground before sitting. People began to look at me strangely, but I felt watched in a gentler way, as if the land itself was deciding whether to trust me. South America changed my anger. I could no longer be angry only for myself. When forests burned on the news, I felt it in my lungs. When rivers were poisoned, my stomach turned. I started speaking at small gatherings, telling stories not as fiction, but as warnings disguised as dreams. Australia taught me to listen before speaking. Long silences no longer frighten me. Sometimes I hummed the one note Wura gave me, very quietly, only for myself. When I did, I felt less alone, as if the world was humming back, too softly for ears but loud enough for the soul. Antarctica stayed as a cold certainty inside me. When people argued about fame or money, I saw snow covering their names. I stopped fearing death, but I started fearing being forgotten before I was finished becoming who I should be. Years passed. My hair turned gray. My hands shook more when I wrote, but I wrote more than ever. Not books, letters. Letters to lands, to spirits, to people who might never exist. I hid them in bottles, in walls, in soil. Maybe one day someone will find one and feel a door open inside them. Sometimes I wonder if I was chosen, or if I simply listened when others turned away. Maybe the world is always speaking, and I was just lonely enough to answer. If you are reading this, and something in you feels heavier but brighter, then the journey is not mine anymore. it is yours. In the final years of my travels, I returned to some of the places that first changed me. On Skye, the stones no longer spoke aloud, but when I touched them, I felt a quiet gratitude, like an old friend who no longer needs words. In the Sahara, I walked alone and placed my palm on the sand, feeling the slow, endless pulse beneath it. In Nepal, the black mirror was gone, but I no longer needed it. I carried its truth inside me. I realized then that the world does not reveal itself to the strong, the rich, or the famous. It reveals itself to those who stay open when fear tells them to close. Every spirit I met had asked me the same question in different ways. Will you only see, or will you carry what you see? So I carried it. I carried it into classrooms where children listened wide-eyed. I carried it into small villages where elders nodded as if they had always known. I carried it into cities where people were too busy to listen, yet sometimes stopped just for a moment when a sentence touched something they had forgotten. I am not a prophet. I am not a hero. I am only a man who answered when the world spoke. One day I will be another story beneath the ground, another name fading from mouths. But if even one person walks more gently because of these words, then the spirits did not choose me in vain. If you ever feel the land watching you, if you ever hear silence breathing, do not be afraid. It is only the world remembering that you are part of it.